I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box. And you cannot compare them at all, so don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire, I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table, come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. It is Thursday. We are getting ready for week 12 of the NFL season. Feels hard to believe, but this is going to be a pivotal time for some teams that have been contenders in the past. Some big matchups on the schedule this week. And that starts with Thursday Night Football, where the 7-3 Buffalo Bills, who are still in good position for the playoffs, but not leading the AFC East, are at the 5-5 Houston Texans, who, if the playoffs started today, would be the 8th seed. And Dennis, my math a little fuzzy, but 8 is bigger than 7, right?
It is. So they would be out.
We'll start with the Bills. Little bit of breaking news this afternoon. Last week, Keon Coleman was a healthy scratch due to missing a meeting. Apparently did not take that very well. His attitude was not reflective of any lessons learned, and he is expected to be a healthy scratch again tonight. So I guess I have two questions. Is there anyone you like in his place? I know in one league I YOLO'd Tyrell Shavers, so we'll see how that goes. But also, Keon Coleman, a guy that we had some high hopes for because of where he was taken and because of the Bills' situation, and after a great week one, now I feel like his future is a little in flux.
Yeah, Keon seems to be starting his AB arc kind of early in his career.
You usually have to earn that arc.
I know, man. He's just, he's going off, and I don't know. He isn't the first receiver with diva-like qualities, and he could end up being like, who was that cat in Jacksonville that flamed out? Looked great, and I mean not even that, but
there's been so many.
Yeah, no, he had a great rookie season, then got drugs and alcohol.
Blackman, Justin Blackman.
Yeah, Justin Blackman. He's a kind of a big receiver, a la Justin Blackman there, but the Bills are a team that if you're self-centered, you're going to be eternally frustrated because they spread the ball around. Josh Allen's looking for the open guy, and it just ends up being that, you got to make sure you're doing things right all the time off the field. And, you'd think, well, OJ was there and he got away with murder, so maybe I can do a bunch of shit too. I don't know, man. Sean McDermott's a little bit different. For me, Khalil Shakir is obviously the wide receiver to roster there. And if you don't have him and you're YOLOing, yeah, Shavers is as good of it as anybody. But, last week, old boy Gabe Davis was activated. You know what they say about your favorite old pair of jeans or your old pair of tennis shoes. There's some comfort there now that he's back in the mix, and who knows, Josh Allen may chuck it over top. The receiver group is literally, as Kirk Herbstreit would call them, the AYOs. It's all you others. That team is James Cook, Josh Allen, and all you others. Dalton Kincaid.
He's out too tonight. Still,
I was going to say he's missed some time, and he's actually third on the team in targets. So, the opportunity was there for Coleman. He seems to be pissing it away. Gabe Davis is going to stroll in off the street, and just probably end up putting up, one of these 4 touchdown games out of nowhere.
No,
I think
it's got to be Shavers because I've put him in a couple of spots. It's got to be Shavers.
The big issue is going to be the Texans have a really good defense, and it may end up being one of those games where Josh runs a lot more than usual because he's running away from pressure and he ends up getting out of the pocket and just taking off. Yeah. But it's going to be an interesting matchup to watch. But you're likely, whether you pick Davis or Shavers or Josh Palmer, you're likely to be disappointed.
Some news came out for the Texans today too. Joe Mixon officially will not return at any point. What? Yeah, so they said Mixon is officially not returning in 2025, and I saw one report that said, as everyone has been expecting since August. I'm like, what? I don't remember there being any talk in August that he was not coming back for the year. They've never really even said, did the guy drop his foot into a wood chipper? I mean, we just never heard anything. But we talked about on Tuesday Nick Chubb not being the guy. How are you feeling about Woody Marks?
I like Woody, but yeah, it's crazy. It's like Mixon's foot must have got JPP'd or something. It's just,
well, and it was an off-season foot or ankle injury, they said. So someday there's going to be a 30 for 30 about the Texans.
Who stole Joe Mixon's plantar fasciitis? No, like Buffalo gives up the second most fantasy points and 5th most rushing touchdowns to running backs, but they're bottom half in production to running backs in the passing game, which is as good as Woody Marks is doing. If you're going to pick which aspect is he better at, he's better as a wide receiver than he is as a pure running back. We got Davis Mills going again, and there's a decent wide receiver crew with Nico Collins, a healthy Christian Kirk, Higgins and Noel are playing well. Dalton Schultz is playing well. So, unfortunately, the offensive line is still a sieve, and that means that Mills is probably going to have a lot of pressure. I like Woody. He's probably more of a flex play on the year. He's RB31. But I think if you're rostering Woody, you could do a lot worse in your flex spot.
I am going to take the Bills tonight.
I tried to take the Texans at home. I probably cut and pasted that in there 5 times, but I'm going the Bills.
I know the Texans have a tough schedule. I looked, ESPN unveiled the playoff machine. So I was playing some scenarios out for, rest of the season. The Texans do not have an easy go, and they're facing a lot of teams that are AFC contending teams that really need the win badly. Buffalo would be in that category. Kansas City, who they're going to play later. The Colts and the Jaguars definitely are trying to win to stay in the playoffs, so I'm not feeling good about them. On to the Sunday games. No more international games. There are 4 teams on a bye this week. The Commanders, the Dolphins, the Broncos, and I totally blanked on the last one. Somebody important is not playing this week because I know it killed me for fantasy positions. It was the 2 internationals. Oh, the Chargers. I try to block out most of the rest of the AFC West. So there you go.
I don't know. After last week, is the Chargers really an issue being gone?
Yeah, maybe not. The Pittsburgh Steelers are at the Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers is not going to have surgery. He's been present for practice, but they said they won't make any kind of a decision until after Friday to see how they feel about him potentially starting. If he can't go, it's going to be Mason Rudolph. How would you feel about Rudolph going there?
Well, the Bears give up the 10th most passing yards per game. And, if you remember back to Mason Rudolph's college career, he was somewhat of a mad bomber there with James Washington
Mm-hmm.
And they had Marcel Aitman was their other receiver they had there at Oklahoma State. So he wasn't afraid to push the ball down the field. And there was certainly some hope in my fantasy life that when Rudolph got his shot, when Ben Roethlisberger got hurt, and James Washington was on the team, that they may be able to rekindle that magic. They never did. But I think DK Metcalf is a substantial upgrade over James Washington. And if Rudolph is like, hey, let's go, Pokes, we're going to go back to my college days and I'm going to chuck it deep and you just run and get it, it could end up being a good thing. The Bears defense gives up the 10th most pass yards and the 3rd most touchdown passes per game, and the 4th highest yards per catch. So this feels like it's shaping up to be a DK Metcalf game. So you know what that means? 20 targets to the tight ends.
No kidding. Meanwhile, for the Bears, it's been all over the place with receivers. They said Luther Burden earning more targets. Seems like he has finally jumped Olamide Zaccheaus on the depth chart. Rome Odunze started hot, but has kind of faded back. DJ Moore feels like a missing man formation. They have 3 receivers that were pretty highly drafted that you'd like to be able to play. I don't know if I feel confident playing any of them. How are you approaching those guys?
I mean, is Luther Burden earning more targets, or did they just decide, hey, we're just going to give him the targets we're not going to give to DJ Moore?
Or did they just realize that they were giving 10 targets a game to Olamide Zaccheaus?
Right. But it feels like they just completely when you think back to the offseason and all this, the dot connecting that we did as fantasy analysts, Ben Johnson hates DeAndre Swift kind of stuff. Turns out he actually hates DJ Moore. Who would have thunk it?
Turns out he actually hates you if you play fantasy.
Yeah. The Steelers give up the 5th most fantasy points to wide receivers and the most passing yards per game in the NFL. So it should be a good game for that receiving core for Caleb Williams. If the Steelers are going to get, Williams is very mobile, so that bodes well for that pass rush with TJ Watt and Nate Herbig there. So the question is going to be, can Caleb Williams keep his cool? He can get a little chaotic and a little scatterbrained when he gets moving. If he can keep his cool, I think there's going to be some opportunities for him to get out of the pocket, make some plays. And they do have good Olamide Zaccheaus is your 4th wide receiver, tells me you've got a plus wide receiver core, but for whatever reason, it hasn't clicked consistently across the board with that team. So I like the Bears receivers this week, but it could be a situation where, like we talk about in San Francisco a lot with, who's going to be the odd man out this week? And that may be what happens in Chicago.
Yeah, and not trying to make fun of Olamide Zaccheaus. He's been a steady player. Just it seemed strange that Burden couldn't surpass him. So maybe it's Burden and Travion Henderson were on the same arc. Let's hope they can get going. I am actually going to take the Bears at home.
So am I.
9-2 New England Patriots at the 3-7 Cincinnati Bengals. Patriots have had some injuries at wide receiver, and veteran Mac Hollins has been stepping into the gap. He has been seeing steady targets and making the most of it the last few weeks. Do you think he has kind of entered that low-end flex range?
I think, so Kayshon Bouttie's back practicing, I think, in full. So he should be stepping back into his wide receiver 2 role behind Stephon Diggs, which pushes Hollins down in that wide receiver 3-4 competition with Pop Douglas. Hollins and Douglas both can play out of the slot, but they're very different receivers. Hollins is a big, strong guy. Douglas is a small, more typical kind of scat back slot guy. I do think that while Hollins could potentially play a significant amount of snaps. I don't know that the targets are going to be there with Kayshon Boutte back. And then, there's talk that Ramondre Stevenson's going to be back in the fold. So I don't know. That makes me sweat a little bit on my Travion Henderson shares. But I think Hollins is a plug and pray, not a plug and play.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for the Bengals, second day in a row, Joe Burrow has gotten a full practice reps with the starters. They're talking about him potentially being on the field on Sunday. The Bengals are 3-7. Jamar Chase suspended this week. Does that even make sense?
No, but Joe Burrow can, if he wants to play, I think they're going to play him. Should they protect him from himself? They can't do it with their offensive line, so maybe they can do it with the front office. And we've seen Joe Flacco needs virtually no reps to be able to step in and start. If Burrow does play, will he be a little rusty? Maybe. But, it bodes well for T. Higgins. Andre Iosivas is their other starter, and then Mitchell Tinsley would be the guy stepping in for Jamar Chase. Tinsley made some great plays in the preseason, going up and getting a couple touchdown passes right in the corner and on the edges of the end zone. So he's a decent receiver. Then the wild cards, Charlie Jones, he's kick returner, get some opportunity. Noah Fant may get in there and make a little bit of noise. And then Chase Brown had a shit ton of targets last week too. So you're muted.
If you're playing Chase Brown this week, the only way you can hope to get any points is if he gets targets, because the Patriots, the one thing you would say about that defense is they don't let you run on them. So I'm taking the Patriots, and I admire Joe Burrow for wanting to come back, but I don't think that's a good plan.
Yeah, I'm taking the Pats too.
2-9 New York Giants at the 6-4 Detroit Lions. It looks like Jackson Dart is trending toward being back. Supposedly, they've had a conversation with him about protecting himself better. How are we feeling about that?
He's a young, tough guy that's going to play the way he plays. You have to learn some of that type of thing when you're not used to doing it. When you have, we see it all the time. Athletes, especially in a sport as physical as football, they are used to just expressing their will physically. And, even the little guys like Pop Douglas, they've got that chip on that shoulder, and they'll fight a defensive lineman at the drop of a hat. I think that Dart, should he come back, he's gonna be under some pressure. The Lions have the 4th highest sack rate. Giants give up the 7th most sacks, so Dart will be under pressure. And I think if he's healthy, you play him. I love Jameis Winston. But if Dart's healthy, you play Jackson Dart. They're middle of the pack against rush yards to quarterbacks, the Lions are, but tied for 3rd in rushing TDs. So there is potential that with the pressure they put on Dart, with his plus mobility, he can make some things happen.
Meanwhile, on the other side, it was a pretty dreadful Monday night game for Goff. Do you think he gets back on track here, back at home against a less robust defense?
Well, wouldn't you think a team with Dexter Lawrence, Kayvon Thibodeau, Abdul Carter, and Brian Burns would be difficult? The Giants have the 9th lowest number of sacks in the NFL, just 23 sacks, and the second fewest interceptions. Aside from playing Tennessee, this is probably Carolina. It's probably one of the better teams to get right on. So I think Goff will step back in. I think the running game will pop back. Hell, we may even David Montgomery might even be fantasy relevant this week.
I am, of course, taking the Lions.
So am I. One pride, baby.
4-6 Minnesota Vikings at the 6-3-1 Green Bay Packers, kind of an important one in the NFC North. We talked about the passing woes of J.J. McCarthy. You know, you're still playing Jefferson, even though it's been a little bit less than you hoped. But they have some other big names in Jordan Addison, T.J. Hawkinson, guys for whom we like the talent. The volume to me has been really hit or miss. I mean, Hawkinson's a pretty well avoid for me, but how are you feeling about these two guys?
Addison's sitting at wide receiver 20 on the year, but he's wide receiver 38 over the last 4 games, which happens to coincide with what?
The return of
JJ McCarthy. So Addison's flex worthy, especially if you have a start 3 wide receiver, 2 flex, which we tend to play in some deep leagues. Addison's certainly startable, but you start him knowing it could be an 8-point game. Like I think his high points over the last 4 games is like 11.1 or 10.8 or something. It's not super high, but you kind of, we've talked about it all off season and stuff, that there's a lot of question marks around JJ McCarthy and his ability to throw the ball consistently and complete passes at a high percentage. And so far, he's on that Christian Ponder side of that Culpepper's Ponder spectrum.
For Green Bay, Josh Jacobs banged up his knee. They're considering him week to week. He has been limited in practice, so he hasn't been ruled out. But the thinking is that we're going to see a heavy dose of Emmanuel Wilson. How do you feel about him for fantasy?
I don't feel awful. Wilson has showed well as a backup, and the team has shown that they trust him some. He was very productive at lower level college. I think he went to like Grand Valley State and some other school. But he scored 37 touchdowns in 27 games. He caught 48 passes across 3 college seasons. He's slightly more athletic than Josh Jacobs, believe it or not. On Kentley Platt's relative athletic score, Wilson was a 7.12 versus Jacobs as a 5.93. Now, they're almost exactly the same size, 5'10", 225. Wilson has a little better long speed, but Jacobs has a little more burst. Jacobs had a 4.64 40 to Wilson's 4.55. But the 20-yard split for Jacobs was a 2.63 to 2.68 for Wilson. So, they're roughly as explosive as each other in like the jumping part of the combine. So I don't think it changes the plan for Green Bay. They like the running game. I don't think they're looking to all of a sudden have Jordan Love throw the ball 40 times. They've got Christian Watson back, and he's playing pretty well. Romeo Doubs is doing Romeo Doubs things. If Matthew Golden can get healthy, and Dontavian Wicks, now you've got that core group back up and running. Luke Musgrave in his first game replacing Tucker Kraft was underwhelming. If we get 75% of Tucker Kraft out of Luke Musgrave, I think we're going to call it a win. We didn't get that last week, but I think that's something to kind of hold out for.
I am going to take the Packers.
So am I.
One thing to note, if you're looking at Packers wide receivers, you probably need to keep an eye on things. I think everybody that plays offense for them, aside from Jordan Love, is on the injury report this week, all listed as questionable, all missing or limited in practice. So what a time to be alive. The 7-3 Seattle Seahawks at the 1-9 Tennessee Titans. Another quarterback that needs a bounce back who is getting a friendly matchup is Sam Darnold on the road. But Tennessee doesn't exactly scare you. Are you feeling better about Darnold this week?
I mean, if you need to bounce back from a string of piss poor games, Tennessee's the place to do it. And Darnold is in the midst of a string of piss poor games. He's had under 10 points in 3 of his last 4 games. There'll be opportunity for Charbonnet and Walker to run the ball well. Jackson Smith and Jigba and Rashid Shaheed both have nice days. I think Darnold gets himself right, puts up some big numbers here.
Meanwhile, for Tennessee, Calvin Ridley done for the year. What receiver do you think steps up, and is there someone that you would be interested in flexing or playing here?
Well, I would have been interested in Elike Omenor, but it seems like he's trending to kind of doubtful and sort of heading like he's not going to play. So that leaves Chimera Dike and Van Jefferson and somebody that I don't remember. So it probably will end up being a Chigokonkwo Gunnar Helm kind of day. The Seahawks get the 4th most sacks, have the 8th highest sack rate, and they're tied for 8th in the NFL in interceptions. It is shaping up to be an unproductive day for the Tennessee offense. It doesn't feel like Cam Ward he's growing. He's taken some steps. He's not taking monster steps, and I don't expect that to happen against Seattle. But he's doing some good things. You just got to let him keep pounding away and getting that experience. But because they're not going to be able to loosen up the line with the passing game, that's going to put the squeeze on Pollard and Spears. So I expect it to be a pretty comfortable win for Seattle.
Me too. I am also taking the Seattle Seahawks. Probably the game of the day, the 8-2 Indianapolis Colts at the reeling 5-5 Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs really need a win here because apparently, according to reports, if they don't make the playoffs, Patrick Mahomes might want to go play for the Jets. That made me laugh so hard today. Did I send you that meme?
No, I don't.
Oh,
maybe
God.
You sent me something.
There was some report that the Jets are going to take a run at Patrick Mahomes because they think if he doesn't make the playoffs, he won't want to go through rebuilding with the Chiefs. And I'm like, why would he want to go through rebuilding with the Jets? But I digress. Fresh off a bye, another kind of big statement sort of game test for Daniel Jones. How are you feeling about him this week?
I've hung, my Chiefs hat on the defense for about a year and a half because the defense finally got good. They stopped spending money on anybody on offense besides Patrick Mahomes. And they, what'd you do then? You put the money in the defense. Defense was playing pretty well. Defense isn't playing quite as well this year. They give up the 6th most rushing yards and the most rushing touchdowns to quarterbacks. And what's one of the things Daniel Jones does pretty well? He's pretty good on the move. He rushes the ball pretty well. And they've got Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce and Josh Downs and Tyler Warren. The Colts have a plethora of weapons, a pretty good offensive line, maybe top 10, without looking at rankings. They're definitely top half, maybe even and maybe better than top 10. But that's going to allow Daniel Jones, he's going to get hit. George Karlaftis is really good. Chris Jones is really good. Trent McDuffie's they've got good players on defense, but I think that Daniel Jones is going to be able to make some plays. And the wild card is that one of the things Kansas City struggles to defend, which is the quarterback run, is something that Daniel Jones does pretty well.
Meanwhile, for the Chiefs, one of the big concerns is they are getting nothing out of the running game. Isaiah Pacheco back at least in limited practice. Can they squeeze anything out of the run game?
So the Colts give up the 5th fewest rushing yards overall and the 2nd fewest rushing yards to quarterback. So even Patrick Mahomes isn't going to be able to kind of hop in and bail him out. Now, that being said, watch Mahomes rush for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I'm not betting on it. I think the Colts are playing very well on both sides of the ball. In the Eagles, they're in a funk. They need to do something. Part of it is they need to figure out where they're going to get a running game from because it's not really coming from Hunt. Pacheco seems to be broken pretty hard. Brashard Smith has not popped off like a lot of dynasty darlings thought he might. But they really struggle in the running. They've got some really good receivers. I like their receiving core a lot with Rice and Worthy and Hollywood Brown and Travis Kelce, but they're very one-dimensional, and that makes them easy to play defense against.
I went back and forth, but I'm going to take the Chiefs. I just feel like they're so desperate.
That was something I took into consideration. I just think the Colts are better, and I'm taking the Colts.
I mean, I don't feel good about it. Because I don't really like Kansas City, but we'll see. The 2-8 New York Jets at the 5-5 Baltimore Ravens. Tyrod Taylor takes over as a starter. What are you expecting from him?
I mean, maybe he can throw a catchable ball to Adonai Mitchell.
I mean, that's not really fair. I think Justin Fields threw catchable balls to Adonai Mitchell, who apparently was born without hands.
Apparently. No, the Jets are in a tough spot. Tyrod Taylor isn't going to be their savior. He had a nice little run as a starting quarterback in the NFL. One thing Tyrod Taylor is he's risk averse. He's not going to push the ball into tight windows. He's not going to take unnecessary deep shots. And while when he was younger, he was, a little more apt to run. He's not a terribly big guy. He's like a 6'1", 205-er, if I remember correctly. I think he's going to play better than Fields because Fields was just playing horrendous. I would expect a good dose of Breece Hall and Isaiah Davis, and I think they'll try to get some balls down the middle to Mason Taylor.
6'1", 217 now. Age comes for all of us.
Yeah, doesn't it though? But without Garrett Wilson in there, I like the combo of Wilson and A.D. Mitchell. I think that makes for a nice pair of receivers, but they're just not at full strength. They've had some injuries on the O-line. It's going to be a rough day. I've got a couple spots where, thanks to, playing fantasy football, Tyrod Taylor's in the starting lineup. But I don't have high hopes.
I think it was last week I told you, I sent you a message after I set my lineups and just said, between injuries and bye weeks, this is really getting a little bit depressing. This week, I had some of the same feelings. There are people in my lineups that if you would have bet me $5 before the season, I'd be starting them unironically on a team that I'm still hoping to make the playoffs in. I would have slapped you, and instead I'm getting slapped. Speaking of getting slapped, you were probably excited when Lamar Jackson came back 2 weeks ago, but after inserting him in your lineup, you're probably feeling like you also got slapped. Jackson, maybe not totally healthy. He has only rushed for 46 yards on 13 carries the past 2 weeks, sub 200 passing yards in each, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. How are you feeling about him for fantasy going into this game?
Time heals and time is passing, and we're at the 12 weeks into the NFL season. Is anybody really healthy in the NFL? I think he's going to be fine. Is he going to rush for 100 yards? Probably not. But I think he could get himself back on track in the passing game. I don't expect the Jets to play this otherworldly game. I think if the Jets needed a win, if the Jets were going to win this week, they'd probably have to play the Titans or the Raiders. But they're not. They're playing the Ravens. So Jackson will be fine. He'll be a QB1. Will he be the QB1? Probably not, but he should be able to put up some decent passing yards. He's got Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers there to be able to get some shit done, and Derrick Henry will do Derrick Henry things.
Yeah, I mean, that is one fortunate thing for the Ravens. They got off to a rough start, but they've had a fairly nice schedule. I am taking the Ravens as well.
So am I.
And if that Ravens and Steelers game plays out as expected, those two teams would be tied at 6-5. What a world. The Cleveland Browns 2-8 at the 2-8 Las Vegas Raiders. The Browns are rolling with Shadur Sanders this week. Can he improve on his 25% completion percentage from his first start?
Way to set the bar high. I mean,
well, I'm just being honest.
You know, I'm not expecting a whole hell of a lot out of Shadur Sanders. I do think getting a full week of practice with the starters and executing the offense in practice obviously helps. It's gonna, you know, is he gonna pass for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns? Probably not, but he is playing the Raiders. So, he might have a chip on his shoulder because Tom Brady didn't draft him and they're buds. So, I don't have high hopes. If they were playing anybody but the Raiders, I probably wouldn't even have a glimmer of hope. But, Quinshon Judkins, I'm saying a lot all of a sudden. Quinshon Judkins.
The good thing for you is I do, in fact, know. So.
Yeah. Quinshon Judkins can eat up clock. He can make plays. Harold Fannin and David Njoku can do that over the middle of the field, and they're both great red zone threats. Jerry Jeudy's getting some plays, popping off here and there. Still hasn't been very consistent. Shadur can throw the ball decent. He just waits too long, eats the ball, takes too many sacks. He's got to trust himself. I don't know if that's going to happen, but yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. Maybe.
I mean, at least it's a softer matchup for your first official start, and a week of practice reps can't have hurt. Meanwhile, for the Raiders, one of the down things about their offense being wildly inconsistent is even though we love Brock Bowers and we know what he can do, which is what he gave us in week 9, the last couple weeks have been a little bit rough. So how are you feeling about Bowers? I feel like he's got that 30-point upside, but with Geno Smith might have a 5-point downside.
So the Browns defense is very, very good. I feel like we're going to see somebody besides Geno in this game. If Geno continues to play like he's been, I think we see Pickett, or I think we see Aiden O'Connell.
They did activate Aiden O'Connell, so it does make me.
That being said, Brock Bowers is the show in Vegas. I love me some Ashton Genty, but he's just not able to get anything done behind that line. Trey Tucker hasn't been any kind of consistent. Jack Besh finally caught a pass last week. Dante Thornton seems to have just completely disappeared. So the offense in general is a mess in Las Vegas. And that in and of itself gives me that glimmer that I'm picking the Browns.
I feel bad about my decisions this week, but I'm taking the Raiders, and I hate the other AFC West teams, and yet I've taken 2 of them. I don't know. The 6-4 Jacksonville Jaguars at the 3-7 Arizona Cardinals. Last week, Travis Etienne did pretty well, but so did Bashal Tutin. Do you think that tag team duo keeps it going this week?
So Tutin played a season high 32% of the snaps. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. It was a blowout against the Chargers, and they they rushed the ball, I think 42 times with their running backs. It was just one. It was an anomaly of a game, in my opinion. ETN is likely to continue as the RB1. Tutin will get some run as the change of pace back. He'll get, the occasional short yardage thing. And if they get in a blowout, they're comfortable going to Tutin. And I think part of it is they're happy to let him get prepared, because I think this is the last we're going to see of Travis Etienne in a Jaguars uniform this year. But Tutin, if he plays well, when they, it could be one of those things where, hey, we're going to give Bashal this series. And then he goes in and he kicks ass, and they're like, you know what? Let's try that again. And now all of a sudden he's playing a 50-50 share, but he hasn't earned the snaps up to this point. And he wouldn't have had the number of carries he had last week if it hadn't been that big a blowout. At least that's what I believe. I like Tootin. I think he's got a lot of talent. He's probably a better inside runner than Travis Etienne, despite Etienne being quite a bit bigger. I think Tootin's just got much better vision, and he's capable, and he's as capable as Etienne in the passing game, at least catching the ball. So at some point there'll be a changing of the guard. I just think it's going to be in the off season.
I thought that same thing, but then when they moved Bigsby, it made me think that maybe because I doubt they'd want to run Tootin all by himself. I don't know, but Jacksonville is just a weird team. One guy we know won't be on the field is Marvin Harrison Jr., who was ruled out for another game. 15 big receptions for 185 yards for Michael Wilson last week. Do you think he picks up where he left off?
There I go again. Harrison seems to be recovering slow from appendicitis for the appendix surgery for a prime athlete. Like
I don't know if they had to do emergency surgery. It makes me think something might have ruptured. And if that's the case, like if you had one that ruptured as just a normal adult, you might end up on family medical leave. So maybe 2 games off isn't that much.
So anyways, I like Wilson a lot. I think Wilson's a pretty good wide receiver. I think he makes a great wide receiver too for just about any team in the NFL. Can he become a legitimate one? Maybe. He's got good size, 6'3", 215. I don't know that I would expect 18 targets again this week. I think they're going to try to get something going with the running game, even though DeMarcado is out.
Well, they may get Trey Benson back. He's been practicing. They opened his window. It's not a lock, but it is a possibility.
We got a couple days to get him back, so that might be good. If not, you're going to get the inefficient Michael Carter.
Either way, I am taking the Jaguars.
This is one I just couldn't.
You don't feel good picking the Jaguars because they never look great. But if the playoffs started today, they would be a playoff team. And
all right,
Arizona
I'm be contrarian and pick the Cardinals just for shits and giggles.
Well, this does feel like the kind of game where the Cardinals could shit and we could all be, or the Jaguars could shit on the field and we can all be giggling. So there's a lot of what I'd like to call 50-50 ball matchups in this week's schedule.
Yeah.
The 8-2 Philadelphia Eagles at the 4-5-1 Dallas Cowboys. And if you're looking for a late window game, this is probably your best option because it is a brutal late window schedule. Dallas, not an incredible defense. They've tried to work on shoring up that rush defense. It's still not incredible, but how are we feeling about Saquon this week?
So Dallas is top 10 in fantasy points and top 10 in receptions to running backs. So while Barkley may not have a monster game on the ground, and the addition of Quinnen Williams and Kenny Clark, was it Clark or Peterson?
No, they got Kenny Clark.
Yeah.
And they got a linebacker from
Logan Wilson from Cincinnati. And DeMarvion Overshown came back from injury. So they've bolstered the defense a bit. And Williams and Clark are 2 very, very good interior linemen. So that has the potential to make it difficult for Barkley. I think it is shaping up to be a game where Philadelphia has to pass because Dallas is going to pass. And so if Dallas gets it done with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens and Jake Ferguson, the potential is going to be there that we may see 25 pass attempts from Jalen Hurts. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, of concern if you're looking for an explosive game for the Eagles. Cam Jurgens is still in concussion protocol, not practicing, seems unlikely. Lane Johnson now has a Liz Frank sprain, expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks. So
yeah, so there's you're not sitting Barkley at this point. He's RB11 on the year. that's probably a good range to expect from him production wise. But I would expect a little more out of the passing game with him than the running game.
Meanwhile, for Dallas, the Eagles have been working on improving their defense. Their defense has been pretty stout. We saw what they did to Jordan Love 2 weeks ago. We saw what they did to Jared Goff last week. How are we feeling about Dak in this matchup?
I feel pretty good. I think Dak will. He could end up. This could be one of those like 4 touchdown, 4 interception games for Dak. He just goes out there and keeps slinging it. With a couple of the challenges that Philly's having on defense, we might see something out of Javonte Williams, who has been a very, very pleasant surprise all year. But George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb have been 2 fairly dominant receivers when they're in there together, and they're both playing really well. And then you got Jake Ferguson that can eat up the middle of the field. Dallas's offensive line is kind of starting to round into form. They're getting healthier. So I like the potential for Dak and for the Cowboys to be able to put up points. One thing the Eagles don't do really well is they don't play catch up very well. And if Dallas can make a couple plays and get a couple early touchdowns on the board, that's going to put some pressure on the Eagles to do the same. Now, A.J. Brown will love that, especially if they throw him the ball. But I think that Dallas is going to be able to put pressure on that Philadelphia offense or defense. And this is a game where Philly's going to have to they're going to have to score points, because I think Dallas can score points even against good defenses. And I'm going to take the Cowboys.
I'm taking the Eagles. I'm a little more nervous about Dak, I think, than you are, because even in a game that was pretty close in week 1, Dak was only QB 29, 7.8 points. Dallas feels like they've been real Jekyll and Hyde. And the last time they played a good defense was when they went to Denver, and they just basically got destroyed. And that would make me a little bit nervous. They are at home, which maybe will help. Maybe they can get Jalen Carter to spit on somebody before the game and get tossed out again. That might help them as well. Another late window game. This one not awesome. The 3-7 Atlanta Falcons at the 2-8 New Orleans Saints. Kirk Cousins back in the starting lineup, which wasn't great in his first start. Are you expecting any better this week?
Yeah, I think there'll be some improvement, but I mean, he's at this stage of his career, he's kind of Shadur Sanders plus. I mean, he's not mobile.
That's so mean.
He holds the ball too long. He's got weapons with Pitts and Robinson. I think is London out there? Yeah, London's towards out.
Yeah, I don't think London is going to play. He has that knee injury. I think they put him back down to doubtful, so he's probably out. And I just wonder, if Darnell Mooney passed away last season and forgot to tell the team, because that's been the fantasy production.
Yeah, it's I don't have high hopes for Kirk Cousins.
Meanwhile, on the other side, Alvin Kamara. Age comes for all of us. He's been a little bit slowed. Their offense hasn't been particularly efficient. Now he's dealing with an ankle injury. How are you feeling about him?
The way he's battled through that knee injury has been admirable. Tyler Shook has flashed a little bit here and there. Chris Olave is being productive. That's great. You want to see that continue to happen. For me, I'm a little nervous about Shook having to go against that pass rush from James Pierce and is it Jalen Walker? No, I don't think Jalen Walker.
Yeah, I think Jalen Walker is
James Pierce and the other rookie defensive end.
Jalen Walker for the Atlanta Falcons.
They get after the quarterback a little bit there in Atlanta. So Kamara will be fine. He's going to catch a few passes.
Not Carolina, though, apparently. 'Cause
Muted.
They let Bryce Young go for 448 yards last
Well,
week.
I can't hear you.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess we'll see if Atlanta can get some pressure. New Orleans not that robust of an offense, I guess, to begin with. But I did think that Shook was better in his last start than they were off last week. So they've had a week to prepare. And Atlanta's defense definitely struggled against Carolina. I mean, 448 yards to Bryce Young. They weren't getting a lot of pressure there. Part of me wonders if they've started to check out because at 3-7, it's clear they're not going anywhere again this season.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna get on the Tyler Shook train for a week and fire up my Chris Olave shares and let's see what happens.
One of us is going to have a bad week, or both of us are going to be mediocre because we've picked a lot of these 50-50 balls differently. I am taking the Falcons. The 6-4 Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the 8-2 Los Angeles Rams. Looks like Bucky Irving will be back for the Buccaneers. But even his offensive coordinator said after missing all this time, you shouldn't expect a full snap count. So what are you expecting in his return?
I think he'll have his same role, maybe 80-85%. But when he's in there, they're going to give him the ball. He's the engine that makes that offense go. And as much as I profess my love for Sean Tucker, I do think that that Bucky Irving will slide right in and do that. And it's great to say right now, hey, we're going to take it easy on him. And then he gets out there on the field and he's just rolling along. And you're like, yeah, maybe we won't take him out. We'll kind of ride this and see what's going on. Irving's a good back, and Tampa Bay has a nice stable with Irving and White and Tucker. Irving is really good between the tackles, decent pass catcher. White is a really, really good pass catcher. That kind of sucks between the tackles, and Tucker's kind of a mix of the two of them, but maybe a notch below each of them in their respective expertise areas.
Meanwhile, for the Rams, can the Buccaneers defense do anything to slow down Nacua and Devontae Adams?
Well, they get some pressure on the quarterback and they cause some turnovers, but they also give up a decent amount of passing yards. And one thing Matthew Stafford does well is he puts the ball in the end zone. More so to Devontae Adams than Puka Nacua, but he gets it in the end zone. So for me, I think Stafford's going to be fine. He gets rid of the ball pretty quickly. One challenge is going to be the loss of Rob Havenstein at right tackle, longtime right tackle for them. I think that Stafford will continue to play at his, QB 6, 7, 8 level there that he is. And honestly, he'd be higher in the quarterback rankings if he ran it all, but he does not run it all. And then, Puka and Adams are going to do what they do. Well, the interesting thing for me is going to be, will Parkinson, I think it's Parkinson that backs up Higbee, with Higbee going on IR, is Parkinson, or will Terrence Ferguson leapfrog him and become that receiving tight end?
Well, Parkinson got a touchdown last week, so you never know. But, it's going to be a tough game. I liked Tampa Bay early this season. I still like Tampa Bay, but they've had a brutal schedule. I am taking the Rams.
I'm going Rams as well.
Monday Night Football, the 6-5 Carolina Panthers, who are actually chasing the Buccaneers, at the 7-4 San Francisco 49ers, who are chasing the Rams. Bryce Young exploded for 448 yards last week against the Falcons. Meanwhile, the 49ers allowed a record-setting 47 completions and more than 400 passing yards to Jacoby Brissett. So, could Bryce Young be poised for another monster game?
He could be. I was amazed, thoroughly amazed to find out that the Niners have the fewest sacks and the second fewest interceptions in the NFL. I was like, that's a bonkers thing. And, losing Nick Bosa does that to you, I guess. Robert Saleh just hasn't been able to overcome it. I think the Niners defense plays pretty well, but they give up the second most receptions to wide receivers and running backs. They're top 10 in fantasy points to quarterbacks. This is a game that looks like it's ready for Bryce Young to stack on top of his last great game. For me, I'm a little bit nervous if I'm a San Francisco fan, just because I think the Carolina Panthers are starting to gel a little bit. It's been a few weeks since Bryce Young came off his injury, and now he's got a nice connection with Teteroa McMillan. Xavier Legette is starting to produce, while Rico Dowdle hasn't been quite as consistent as early in the season. Him and Hubbard are a formidable rushing duo. So, I think Bryce can have a pretty good game.
Meanwhile, for the 49ers, they are actually starting to get healthier on offense. For the first time, I think, in a while that I can remember, neither Juwan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, or Demarcus Robinson are on the injury or suspended list. So how are we feeling about the 49ers receivers?
I think getting Pearsall back is great. He makes a great complement to Juwan Jennings. Kendrick Bourne will be the other wide receiver, starting with Brandon Ayuk going the way of Joe Mixon. The Niners, Jennings is wide receiver 43, but wide receiver 17 in the last 4 weeks. The Panthers don't put hardly any pressure on the quarterback, so that bodes well for Brock Purdy. And Purdy, it goes back to, his first start in the league. Guy just makes good decisions. He makes quick decisions. He processes at one of the fastest rates of any quarterback in the NFL, and that is good. And then you top it all off with, hey, here's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah. And, Carolina, it's hard to count them out because they've won some games you didn't expect, but I'm going to take the 49ers.
Yeah, I'm taking the Niners as well.
Well, that'll do it for the Week 12 slate. Hope you guys have a wonderful weekend out there. Enjoy Thursday Night Football. If you need something to fill those hours before Sunday, what can the people do?
Cruise on over to your favorite podcast platform. Hit that search button. Type in the Fantasy Football Roundtable podcast. Give us a listen. Tell 2 friends. Have them give us listens. Go and subscribe to our podcast. We love that. It helps us out a ton.
Well, that'll do it for us today. We'll see you on Tuesday to recap Week 12. Until then, have a wonderful weekend.